So I'm going to share my screen with you all. I'm going to be jumping between Microsoft Word and Adobe Acrobat today. Here we go. So I'm actually going to start our lesson on accessible PDFs here in Microsoft Word. And if anyone wants to kind of chime in and let me know if you can see my screen okay, or if I need to change anything, please do. I don't have a backup monitor to be able to see if this looks okay from your end. So I'll need audio on if I need to change anything. But I want to start in Microsoft Word because really the biggest lesson when it comes to accessible PDFs is to build an accessible Word document. If you're creating PDFs using Adobe, that's a bit of a nightmare. And in general, Word just has some really good accessibility features that we've gone over in previous webinars. And so if you haven't seen that, that's something you'll want to review because a lot of those features will carry over when you save the document as a PDF. So not to mention Word documents are editable, so you can always, you want to make sure you hold on to that source file because if you get rid of that source file, you can just guarantee that'll be the day when you realize there's an error in the PDF file and you need to change it. So anyways, in order to save your document as an accessible PDF, and this document, for the most part, I think I have one error purposefully built in, and now I've forgotten where that error is. This will be fun. For the most part, this document here is accessible. So I'm going to go ahead and go to File and Save As. And then for the file type, I'm going to change it to PDF. And what I want to point out to you, and it might be hard to see, and I apologize if it is when I go to save the document, I have this button for options. And I'm going to open that, and there's one setting here that says document structure tags for accessibility. And you want to make sure that box is checked off. This is the default, I believe. I don't remember ever having to go in and set this any differently, and it's always checked off when I go to save my documents, but it's something you just want to double check. And then I'm going to click OK and save it. And then what's going to happen is when I save it as a PDF, it opens in Adobe Acrobat. So I'm using Adobe Acrobat Pro DC, and that might not be the version that you have access to at work. What I would say is the kind of newer the versions of, be it Word or Acrobat, they're going to typically have more accessibility features. So if you're using an older version, I do encourage you to see if you can get an update so that you have more features available. And I cannot speak for older versions of Adobe Pro, or excuse me, Acrobat Pro. I will say PDF is not my format of choice. And in learning how to make accessible PDFs, that opinion has only strengthened because this is not going to be as easy as it is when we make documents in Word. So just a heads up, don't be expected, or don't be surprised if you hear a little bit of frustration in my voice as we go through this. But the important thing about Adobe Acrobat Pro is that it gives me the ability to edit the document. And if you don't have Pro and you only have Acrobat Reader, then you're not going to have these features. So that's something to think about if you're making and producing a lot of PDFs. You want to make sure that you have Acrobat Pro in order to go in and make changes to your document to ensure that it's accessible. So What we're going to do, I just want to start by giving kind of an overview of Acrobat Pro and showing you kind of which tools and which features we're going to be working with, because that's a big piece of this, is just knowing how to use the program. So when I open up my document, this is, I've got the document mainly on the screen. I have different tools in kind of the tools pane on the screen, and I can also access the tools from the top ribbon. But my navigation pane is collapsed, and that's going to be pretty vital for what we're doing today. So there's kind of a gray band that's running along the left side of the screen, and that's going to open up the navigation pane. You can also access it through View, and then under Show and Hide, you've got different navigation panes that you can select. The tags one is one that's already there, as is the order pane, content, attachments, bookmarks, and page thumbnails. So you want to be aware of this navigation pane, because that's how you're going to get access to a number of the tools that we're going to use today. So a quick note about the panes that we'll be using. The order pane is going to allow us to kind of see the read order for our document, and this is not the read order for someone using assistive technology. But it's called reflow, and it's when you might kind of simplify a document, or you're looking at how it might adjust to, you know, if someone's going to open it on a tablet versus a computer. The read order is going to be pretty important, and so we'll kind of play with that a little bit later. The next piece, or excuse me, I have the content tab open. Here's the order pane, and you can see when I click on that, different sections of text are numbered, and that's telling me kind of the order in which this is going to be read for the reflow purposes. What I had open earlier was the content pane, and this is just a much more kind of in the weeds, granular look at the content in the document. And I'll talk about kind of why this is important in cases where you'll want to use the content pane. But for the most part, the order pane and then the tags pane is going to be, those two are going to be the most important kind of areas that we're going to be working in. And so the tags pane is where we're able to see the semantic structure of the document. So here's how we see where sections of text are labeled as, you know, heading 1, heading 2, we have paragraph text. If we have an image, it's marked as a figure. And so that's where you're going to be able to kind of view that structure of the document, all of the kind of the vital part of ensuring someone can navigate it easily if they are using a screen reader. This is the order that's going to matter most in those cases. And so that's why we talk about tagged PDFs as being kind of the accessible format for a PDF. What I also want to point out are the different tools that are available in Adobe Acrobat. So there's a few that are shown in the tools pane, and you can search them, but I'm just going to open up the full list of tools available. And the two that I want to point out is the Action Wizard and then the Accessibility tool. And you can add these so that they always appear in that tool pane. I don't do that just because I try to keep Acrobat looking as close to what everyone else's Acrobat looks like rather than customize it too much. So that's kind of the tour of Acrobat Pro. The Action Wizard is what you'll use to make a document accessible. And the accessibility tool is what we're going to use to run a report on this document right here. So that's our next piece. Looks like Monique might have gotten kicked out. We'll go ahead and run the accessibility report on this document, see if there might be anything that I missed in Word that would jeopardize the accessibility of this document. So I'm going to go into Tools and select Accessibility. And now the accessibility menu is on the right side of my screen. And here I'm going to select Full Check. And what this is going to do, it's going to give me a report about the accessibility of the document. I'm specifying that it's a document. I pretty much leave all of this checked so that everything is scanned. And then I'm going to click Start Checking. And my report appears in that navigation pane. You can see the accessibility tool has now been added to the navigation list. And I'm told there's 3 issues with the document, and there's 1 issue in terms of alt text. So I'm just going to click on the little plus mark in order to expand the information about the document. And so what I can see is that it's not an image-only PDF. An image-only PDF would be if you have a scanned PDF and the text hasn't been converted into text, so it's essentially, a photograph of your document. That's an image-only PDF, and that's going to be really your worst-case scenario. So I'm feeling good that this is not image-only, and that's to be expected because I saved it from a Word document. I'm told here that the logical reading order needs a manual check, and this makes sense. That's something that a machine is not going to know, the order in which the document should be read. So you have to be smarter than the machine here, and Adobe's calling it out. And we'll talk about how to check that read order. But I did fail in terms of the title. This is pretty common. I overlook this a lot. And so you can click on this, and I right-click. You can either select Fix or Explain. If you want to learn more about what the problem is, it'll open up the Adobe website and try to explain what the problem is. But here we'll just do Fix. And this is where the document metadata menu or pane appears. And so the default is it's going to leave the title as is, and that means it's the file name. So my file name is showing up in the title of the document, pdfsourcedoc.pdf. That's not too bad, but for scanned documents, let me see if I can find an example. I don't have one open right now, but I don't have my scanned one open either. Here we go. It's usually a series of numbers making up the date. So this document title would be 1212170022, and that's not very descriptive. So always good to just go in and give it a title. And what this will do, if someone is opening that PDF in a browser, the tab for that PDF will display the title. So again, it just makes it more meaningful for all users. And then my name's already listed as the author that came over with Word, but you can also, put in the subject of the document, keywords as well. And this just helps in terms of making making the document more or kind of easier to find if someone's doing a search. So maybe they're searching your website for whatever document that you have, that you've created, and having this metadata in there will help them so that that document's more likely to appear kind of earlier in the search. And so once I fix that, then, it says title is passed, and so we're good. I have another error that showed in terms of alt text, and so it says, I have a figure somewhere here, I'll expand it, that does not have alt text. So I have one screenshot image and then another just kind of swirly line that's more decorative. And this is something where I can go in, again, if I right click, I can fix it. I'm not going to fix it right now because I want to show you another way to do that. But it's one way to kind of fix up your document pretty quickly, I think, using this accessibility checker. So nice tool to have on hand to be able to kind of check things. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be perfect. As I said, I put something in here that's not a heading and should be, and it doesn't seem to be flagging that. So as with anything that's automated, you're going to have to be smarter than the machine and dive down using the order tab and the tags to look a little bit kind of closer at your document and catch any issues. So another thing that I want to show you, this is just the accessibility checker. Actually, I guess we'll wait. We'll wait on that. But let's go ahead. With the accessibility menu open, we can start setting alt text for our images. And so I clicked on Set Alternative Text, and the message that pops up is Acrobat will detect all figures in this document and display associated alternate text. And I click OK. And Acrobat highlights the image, though I will say there have been cases where I've not been able to find which image it's referring to, so I don't always like this approach. But it highlights the current image, image 1 of 2, and it gives me the field where I can type my alt text, or I can click that it's a decorative figure. So in this case, it's not decorative. So I'm just going to type screenshot of file save pane with arrow pointing to options. There we go. And then this is one thing I don't like about Acrobat. I tend to think as soon as I type that, I want to hit save and close. But if I do that, I'm not taken to the second image. So instead, I want to click on the arrow to go to image 2 of 2. And here's that example where it's not highlighted. And so if I had a few different things going on in this page, I might not know exactly which image this is referring to, which is a little annoying. But I know it's referring to that kind of wavy line that I put in there just as kind of a visual break between sections. And for this case, I'm just going to mark it as a decorative figure. And then save and close. So it looks like it's still showing those as failed, but I probably just need to, let's check again. There we go. And now everything passed with my alt text. So this accessibility tool is really helpful in terms of going in and kind of checking a few things. But we still have to look at the logical read order. So I'm going to go to the order pane in the navigation menu in order to check the read order or the reflow order. And the first thing I notice, the title of my document and the numbers appear for me. You can change that around a bit. But I've got the title of the document, accessible PDF, and then the first section, source document, is numbered number 2. The text underneath has number 3. And then that screenshot that I just added alt text for says 19. And so that doesn't make much sense. So if someone put this into reflow mode, it looks like that image would be the last thing in the document. And this is pretty simple to fix. I can just go kind of track down the image, and I can drag it up. And I'm going to drag it right under number 3, make it number 4. Someone's unmuted. I think Catherine, if you wouldn't mind muting yourself, that would be great. And so I've got now, it'll, have the text for about the source document, and then it'll take the viewer to the figure, the screenshot of a file with the Save panel. And the order looks pretty good otherwise. And so the numbers start over. A second. And oh, someone's noisy. Catherine Clyde, could you mute yourself?
Yeah, I'm working. Sorry.
Okay. Or Monique, could you mute her, maybe? All right. So, yeah, that's gonna start over on the second page. Now I'm a little lost. Anyways, but that's how you can check that read order for reflow. The next piece that's kind of really the most important part is going to be the tags and what we call the tag tree. So here, the tags are similar to, oh, right, Monique, I need to make you host, sorry. Just gonna stop real quick and do that. There you are. Okay, cool. So the tags are really similar if you're familiar with HTML. They're very, very similar in that way. If you're not familiar, I have in the document, and I'll be sending this document out with the recording, headings are going to show up as H1, H2, H3, H4, so forth. And then images are going to be tagged as figure, so you can kind of find those. Lists will be tagged with an L. Here we go. We've got a list down here. And then tables are tagged as table. So it's pretty easy to kind of find what you're looking for if you're familiar with the structure of your document. We have an artifact tag here, which is for the image that I marked as decorative. And then that essentially means it's kind of skipped over. It's considered part of the background. So that's the tag tree for this document. And it looks, as I would expect since I created the document in Microsoft Word and saved it as a PDF. One really nice tool with this is that you can, select some text and then from the little drop-down menu in the tags pane, select find tag from selection. And so it'll go hunt down where that content is in the tag tree. And that's just really good because this tag tree is not always going to be the easiest to follow if you have a really long document. So that's really, really helpful. And same with if you click on a tag, it will highlight the text in the document. So, and if that's not happening for you, it's just you want to open that drop-down menu again and make sure you have you've selected highlight content so that you can kind of see things as you're navigating. But again, I told you I hid something in here that wasn't a heading, and now I'm wondering if it's this check read order. I can't even select it. But it looks like it might be because I just clicked on heading 2 and I get accessibility report, and then paragraph, paragraph, and then paragraph tag for what should be a heading level. So again, this isn't something that the accessibility checker caught, but luckily, I think I'm smarter than the machine. And so I found that it's tagged as a paragraph text, which is problematic. So this is really easy to fix. We can do this a couple of different ways. One way is you can just double click and you can go in and change the tag. So I could just do H3 to make it heading level 3. I'm going to leave it though as paragraph to show you the other way. You can right click and select properties. And then there's a drop down for the type of tag. And so this is where I'm going to go find heading level 3, select that, and then hit close. And so it edited the tag in that tag tree. So there's going to be certain things that the checker will find, certain things that it won't. And you just want to be able to kind of keep an eye on that. So, okay. That's going to be the tags pane. That's going to be pretty vital to making sure that you have that structure built into your document. But again, easier to do if you've created the document in Word. So the next piece, I'm going to zoom in on this for you all. So it's really tiny. I mentioned with alt text that with the accessibility tool, you can go in to set alt text. Another option is, and what's a really great resource to be aware of in Acrobat is the read order panel. So I went to the order pane in the navigation menu and then the drop down menu, and I'm going to open the show reading order panel. And what I get is touch up reading order. And so this is something if, for whatever reason, if there's something in your document that didn't get selected and should be, or, I have this blank space underneath a paragraph that's marked that really doesn't need to be acknowledged at all. I can click on that, and then from the touch-up reading order panel, I can mark that as background. And notice as soon as I did that, it went away because that just means it's not part of the content, it's not important. And I can do the same with this decorative image. Again, just kind of mark it as background, and now it's not even going to be considered for that reflow. And if there was something that was in the document that should be considered, you can actually select that item. And then if we wanted, maybe we did want to put alt text behind this line for whatever reason, we could then tag it as a figure. And notice it'll say no alt text exists because we just marked it as a figure. So it's a nice little reminder there that you don't have alt text. So, but I'm just going to select it again and mark it as background. And you can actually, one of the nice things is from the content pane, you can remove things entirely. And so, let's see if I can find this. I guess I'm on page number 2. Or no, I'm on page number 3. you can see how I'm using the content pane to drill down. I've got the container for the artifact. There's that space that just shouldn't be acknowledged. I can go in actually and delete that, just remove it out entirely. And now I'm trying to find, for some reason it's not showing me where the line is. Anyways, I was going to delete it out. There's ways that you can remove items entirely from the document. So when people say PDFs aren't editable, that's not true. We can go in, we can edit pieces out entirely. I was going to try and do that. Maybe we'll just do it with some of the text instead. Where is alt text for images? I'm just selecting that and then doing find content from selection. It's not finding, there it is, on the wrong page. So we could remove this, and it removes it from the document entirely. So that whole idea that PDFs aren't editable is not true at all. We can go in and let's see. Oh, how did I do it earlier? There we go. Edit text or add text. I should have remembered my keyboard battery is running low. But I'm just adding text right into the document. Just as, you know, if we were going to edit Word, same deal. So these are, while these tools make documents accessible, they can also be used to edit a PDF and make changes. So just something to consider when people say that PDFs aren't editable and that's why they need to be used. I like to point out that that's not true. Okay, we've kind of gone through some of the how to use the tags pane, how to check the read order, and then the content pane, using that content pane, in fact, to remove items entirely. But one thing, and this is a little bit more the painful part about PDFs, is kind of how to work in scanned documents. So since this document was built in Microsoft Word and my table was built in Word and was built to be accessible, I'm not going to show you anything about kind of addressing this table because we're pretty good, but I'm going to open a scanned document in order to demonstrate how you can run into problems with tables if you're using scanned materials. So let me pop open source document. Here we go, scanned PDF for tables. And so I just opened the scanned PDF, and I want to point out that it says this page contains only an image. Would you like to run text recognition to make the text on this page accessible? So that's kind of a default notice that I get in Acrobat, which is good because I need to check yes. Otherwise, I can't go in and do any of those things that I was just doing because it's not recognized as text. So it'll ask you, you know, the document language. Make sure it's English and click OK. And it's asking about reading order. So it says infer reading order from document, which is the recommended setting. But you can also specify left to right, top to bottom reading order. It says use reading order in raw print stream. I'm not sure what that means. But I'm just going to go with the recommended setting. and I'm going to have it read the entire document. And click Start. And that's essentially just trying to do some of the work for me in terms of kind of making the document understandable. So what we want to do is go in and see what's going on with this table. So I've got kind of my read order. It's just telling me page 1. I'm not actually able to expand that out. And it says no tags available. So that's problematic. There's a few different ways that we could do this. The first would be we could open that read order panel again, and we could go in and select different text, mark it as, you know, headings or just paragraph text. And if you have a pretty simple document, this wouldn't be too difficult to do. But sometimes it's kind of a pain to select items. The other option is we could go into the action wizard and close the touch-up read order and select Make Accessible. And I'm going to click Start. And what this is going to do is it's going to walk me through a few things to try and make this document accessible. So for the title, scanned PDF, and this one I'm going to save specifically for the table. I'm just going to fill in some of this metadata and then click OK. Again, specifying the language, which is English. That's part of the recognition process. And it's running a bit. It's asking if I have any form fields in here, if those should be detected or not. And in this case, this document isn't used as a fillable form, so I'm going to select Skip this step. And the reading language is English. And we're just waiting. And then it says, I get that notice, Acrobat will detect all figures in this document and display any figures with missing alt text. And I click OK. And it says, there are no figures with missing alt text. And I click OK again. And now it's going to run that accessibility report for me. And so it's tried to make some fixes, but it's also going to point out, and it says, you know, my heading levels aren't appropriate. It wants me to start with heading level 1. And this is where we can go into the tag tree and start kind of verifying how Acrobat has tried to kind of make sense of the document. And so it starts as heading level 4, and then we get the paragraph following it. But this is where it's most important. I want to see what happened with my table. And already I can see I don't have a table tag, so that's problematic. And if I pop into the read order, I can kind of see it's reading county, king, breakfast, lunch, dinner, total as 1, and that doesn't make much sense to me. So we're going to have to clean up. We're going to have to fix this table. And what I'm going to do is open that touch-up read order again and select all of the text there that makes up the table. And then I'm going to select table. So that changes it, fixes it a bit. I can kind of click through here. Let me zoom in a bit, make this easier to see. The first cell, it's actually lumped the first 2 cells together. So I need to kind of pull those apart. So I highlighted breakfast, which should be its own cell. And from the Touch Up Read Order tab, I'm going to select Cell, and that helped. So now those are two separate cells, which is good. And I'm going to go check to see what's happening in the tag tree. So what it did, though, it pulled that data cell out of the table, which is a little wonky. So we need to fix that. And this is, I'm sure, following along, you're thinking, wow, she's really in the weeds with this. And welcome to Adobe Acrobat. You've got to get in the weeds with this. This is why I recommend using Word documents and not PDFs. We can talk more about that at the end. So, but what I'm doing, I'm just kind of clicking through the tag tree to see where everything is. I do like that it's identified these as table headings. So the tag is TH instead of a data cell, which is TD. But notice in that table, that row, TR, table row, has table heading county, table heading lunch, table heading dinner, and then table heading total. So breakfast is still left out. But what's nice here is that I can actually move this. And I'm going to drop it in. It's still not quite in order. I'm just trying to pull it out. And that's where it gets a little tricky, is making sure it doesn't get nested underneath something else. So, this is why I hate Adobe. Just trying to find a way to get breakfast underneath the table row, but not nested under one of the others. It's a nightmare. I did it earlier. No, it doesn't want to work. Anyways, it's also marked as a data cell, so we can, again, right-click on that and switch it over to table header cell. I don't know if that's going to help me. What a pain. Well, there we go. Okay. So you just have to drag and drop over and over to try and figure it out. But we finally got it so that when I expand the table row, I can see, I've got all my table headings. They're in the right order. So county, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then total. So I can close those up now. And when I expand the others for the table row, if I look at the second row, it also marks that I have column headings. And so that first cell says King County. This is a table of per diem rates, is marked as a heading. And then I have the data cells, $19 for breakfast, $22 for lunch, $33 for dinner. The total is $74. So that's pretty good. We're on track with our table. Acrobat helped with that. But I do want to set the scope. Let me close out some of this so my screen's a little bit cleaner. The scope of those heading cells. So what we're going to do, we're going to go back to the order pane, and I'm going to click on each cell from that header row in the table, and then right-click and switch into the table editor mode. And so the table's now gone red. It's a little bit different. And I'm going to select, now I'm going to select, you could have done that without selecting all the separate cells. I'm going to select those headers for each column, so that top row, and then right-click and select Table Cell Properties. And the scope of those header cells, they're labeling columns. So the scope should be set to columns. And then click OK. And then we do have those other headers that are, the scope is the row. They're labeled for the adjacent row. I'm going to do the same thing. I select all three. I do that by hitting the Shift button and clicking on each one. And then right-click for Table Cell Properties, mark the scope as row, and click OK. So that's just one extra step in there, but now our table looks pretty good. So we went from kind of some really wonky text initially from the scanned PDF to making it into a more legible table with the proper structure to it, so that if someone's using assistive technology, they'd be able to navigate that table. So you can see how the Action Wizard does help with some, it picked up on the bold text in terms of making those cells as the table header cells. But if you ever need to change that and you forget that it should be TH, again, you can always just right-click on a tag and select Properties, and from there you get a drop-down that's more descriptive for the type of tag that you need, so you don't actually have to type in the tag itself. So let's go ahead and close that out. All right, and I'm trying to see if there's anything that I've forgotten. We talked about kind of setting graphics as background, again, using that read order pane that you can select items and then mark them as background. And that's good to do not just with decorative images, but also if you have like footers or page numbers, because I don't know if any of you have ever seen a case where a PDF got converted. I see this a lot with websites. It got converted to HTML, and mid-sentence it's interrupted by what would have been footer text and page numbers, and that's just because that was picked up as text and not set as background. So those are visual references, and so it's stuff that's best to set as an artifact, that it's not interrupting the flow of your content. So that's something else I wanted to talk about is scanning materials. So here's a really terrible scan. It's a scan from a book. The book wasn't pushed down very hard, and so there's a really strong shadow along the spine of the book. The text is also kind of in this wavy form because the book wasn't laid flat. And this can be really problematic when it comes time to try and really access the text from the scan. But let's go ahead, we'll try. So I'm going to go into the tools and find the Action Wizard. There it is. And select Make Accessible. And we'll give it a title. Run through the usual. No form fields. I'm going to skip that text. English is the language. I'm going to look for any figures. No figures. You don't need to worry about alt text. And now we'll run the checker. So again, it's always going to say you need to check the logical read order. You have to check color contrast, and it says the headings are probably off. We can go into the order tab to see. It looks like we have a logical order there, but here you can see it picked up on, the title of the book is Making Online Teaching Accessible, picked up on that footer from the page as part of the text. So that's something I would want to change. I'd want to mark as background. And you can look at the tags, mostly just paragraph text that hold this as a heading level 4. It didn't mark previous bold text that looks like a subsection. It didn't pull that out. But more importantly, what I want to do, I'm going to highlight the text, copy it, and I'm going to paste it into a Word document just to give you a sense of what happened. Let me blow up this Word document a bit. Because this is such a bad scan, it didn't even convert the text very well. So even if you go through all of that of, okay, it's a scan, let's just, OCR it, get some tags in there, it's pretty awful. So even if we start with one of the first sentences, checking V got turned into TLLE, so it somehow missed on the horizontal line in the H. So checking TLLE accessibility of web tag, somehow it missed the E. And then end of chapter, it actually cut out sections of text entirely where there probably just wasn't enough contrast to determine what that text should be. And we see a number of spelling errors. It looks like will got turned into lowercase w, lowercase I, uppercase U. And so that's probably because it's, it's a serif font where you've got the little feet on the L, and Acrobat connected those feet and detected it as a U instead of 2 L's. So this is pretty awful. The scan wouldn't even be something worth using to try and convert it into an accessible document because it's just such a nightmare. Essentially, someone would have to retype all of this text because it's so bad. So that's one way to kind of check the text, make sure it was converted properly, or if you need to, if it's just a nightmare to work with Adobe Acrobat, then run the text recognition and then paste it into a Word document and see if you can work from there. That could be sometimes the best option because Acrobat is a bit clunky to use and is honestly just a pain to use. I'm not a huge fan of the tool. I'm also not a super user, so there may be some of you out there that are just much better at using Acrobat and can navigate through more efficiently than you can with Word, but I think for the vast majority of us, being able to kind of take the content over into Word and make it more accessible could be quicker. But in all cases, try to avoid scanned documents. And if you are working with scans, just really make sure that you've got a high quality scan because Adobe's not going to do the best job at kind of making sense of the content. So that's something to watch out for. So that's where I'm going to wrap it up. We covered a lot, and it really, Adobe's one that takes just a lot of practice to solidify kind of the workflow. And a lot of it depends on the type of document you're working with in terms of which workflow is going to make the most sense. So I'm going to pop over and see what questions came in and see if I'm going to be able to answer any of them. So, okay. And the first question was, one of the images in your document has 2 numbers attached to it. You addressed only one. Can you please explain? I think what that was, let's do this again. Let's save as Adobe PDF. I think what you're referring to, and you can whoever asked the question can chime in if this is not the case, is the number where I've got, like, on the screen now, my image has number 19. I'm in the order pane, so it's showing me the reflow order. But right next to the image, it also says number 4.
That's right. You got the right one.
Okay. Okay, cool. So what's happening here is 19 refers to the image. 4, what that is, it's just a blank space. There's nothing there. I don't know why Adobe picked up on it, other than maybe in the Word document, there's this, you know, my cursor is right there. I've seen a lot of odd blank spaces get pulled up. We can pop into the content. Let's see. Yeah, it's an empty container. So when I click on the text, there's nothing there. So what I would do with this, I'd probably just delete it out because it's really meaningless. But that's what that other number was. Oops. Of course, now it's not going to be there because I deleted it out.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then let's see, if you tag something as a decorative figure or set it as background, how do screen readers handle that? So it'll be skipped over. It's just like if you, this happens if you've got a website and you put in null alt text or a Word document or PowerPoint and you have null alt text, it's essentially creating that null alt text and making sure that it's not part of the content at all. And so that's why it's really important to make sure items are tagged and that they're tagged as an artifact so that it's left out. Okay, and then the next question was, hyperlinks and footers always generate an error for me. Any way to include? So I don't know if I'm going to fully answer your question, but what I'm going to say is it kind of goes back to artifacting that content that you don't want to interrupt the content of your document or like the body of your document. So what I would recommend here is artifacting anything in the footer and then bring that into maybe like the very end of the body of your document. So if you have something like the copyright information, I would strip that out from the footer, again, so that someone could just skip the footer. The footer's not going to interrupt the read order here. But then I'd plug it in at the very end of the document. And I guess I'm not certain what the error is, so I don't quite know how you would go about fixing it. But I guess that would be my recommendation, is to make sure any information that's presented in the footer that's not like a page number, that you just make sure it's also presented elsewhere in the document. The same is true with like watermarks. So if you have a document and it says draft in the background, you want to make sure draft is noted somewhere else in that document, like preferably the title of the document or heading 1, so that a user who can't see the watermark still receives that information that it's a draft. So I hope that helps. The next question was, does Adobe Converter do OCR or is it something better? Yeah, it's OCR, so optical character recognition, where it's trying to figure out the text characters and trying to turn those into text. So I don't, you know, I think from that last example from the scan document, I don't think it's something better. And then the next question was, am I understanding correctly that you can change the heading level tag without affecting the underlying style that was transferred over from Microsoft Word? Are you asking about the look of the font? I don't know who asked that question, but if you're able to turn on your mic, that would help.
Yes, that was the question. Okay. It's not going to affect the way the heading looks. It won't transfer to our heading 3 style if I want it to be heading 1 as tagged.
Right, yeah. I mean, you could change anything. I could go in here, let's see, I could take, you know, that top paragraph text, and I could change that tag even, you know, let's do heading 1 just to be dramatic. Change it to heading 1. It's not going to change the look of my document whatsoever. Because again, that's just the semantic structure that's in the background used for navigation. Unlike in Word, yeah, you know, if I were to take that text and select heading 1, it would change the look. Even though there are ways, you know, obviously I could make that heading 1 and then just go in and rechange it without losing the fact that it's heading 1. So there's, you know, kind of wonky stuff like that. But in Adobe, it's not going to change the look. It's not associated with the styles and the aesthetics of your styles as you have it set up in Word. Adobe's not playing with that. So, all right, and then it looks like those are all of the questions. Hopefully I didn't overwhelm you too much, but at the same time, hopefully I did, because honestly, PDFs are one of the worst formats out there. So if I can encourage you to use Word documents, I will say that's my hidden objective. And you can, you know, you can set up Word documents. I actually opened a document of my own today that I had set permissions or restrictions on. And you can do that under the File tab. You can protect document and restrict editing. And I had set it up as a password deal, so I restricted editing, opened up my own document, and forgot the password. So it was as good as a PDF to me. There are ways to protect Word documents if you need to. You can still make them fillable forms if that's something when you use the developer tab to build in those form fields. And then you can restrict editing except for if you want people to fill in forms or do track changes or leave comments. So there's some ways to kind of build in that feature if that's why you're using PDF. But that's it. I think we've run over time, so we'll get this webinar converted and loaded up. I haven't sent the recording from last week's webinar yet. I'm still waiting on captions for that, and then I'll get that sent out as well. So good luck with accessible PDFs. It's not the simplest thing, so I wish you the best in that endeavor. And next week, I think our webinar is on accessibility in math and STEM. So we'll be talking about some of the unique challenges to those disciplines, for those disciplines. So thanks again, everyone.